We have to restore ecosystem functions, but our environments, particularly our coastal environments, are going to be very different 20, 30, 50 years from now. Because the coasts are at the leading edge of this change, and we need to be thinking, what do we want them to look like in 50 years?
Well, welcome everybody to the Sea Has Many Voices and our interview with Dr. Jerry Schubel, the CEO and President of the Aquarium of the Pacific. Thanks, Jerry, for all your time. We've talked a lot about climate change in past segments with you, and you and I both agree that's where the world needs to focus our attention. It's a triage, isn't it, in a way? There's a lot of things happening in our world. Our massive and rapid industrialization has resulted in many unintended consequences, of which global warming is one. But there are others that have attention. And you have been a leader for many years in bringing these powerful, the power of an aquarium, which is one of the most popular places in the world for people to go and learn things. They trust aquariums. There's science showing that. And it's the animals, really, at the end of the day, isn't it? It's about the animals that draw people in.
Yes.
And these animals are kept here. And one thing people don't realize in an aquarium is that the amount of work that goes into this. It's like, somebody once said it would be like, like art aquariums. I mean, art museums have paintings on the wall and sculptures here and there. And it would be like, imagine going into an art museum and feeding and cleaning and moving around every painting and every sculpture every day, 5 or 6 times. Can you give our listeners, maybe we'll do a cutaway here, of a glimpse of what happens at the Aquarium of the Pacific behind the scenes? I mean, just like what's a day in the life?
Well, these are relatively modest-sized institutions, but they're very complex because we have to feed all the animals. So we've got a food service for animals and for people. We've got a hospital for animals in which we provide both preventative and restorative medicine to the 11 or 12,000 animals that we have.
You have 11 or 12,000 different species here?
Not different species. No.
Okay. Animals, okay.
And so these are complex organizations. But basically, you're right. It's the animals that bring people in. They're the bait to get them in here. There's a wonderful Russian proverb that says, it's not the horse that pulls the cart, it's the oats. And the oats in an aquarium are the live animals. But then you've got the cart. And if all you do is bring people in and entertain them and take their money so they can buy things in the gift shop and the restaurant, then we surely have failed. We have the opportunity to really engage them in some of these big issues in ways that entertain, engage, and empower them. And the model we have always used is to bring the best scientists to the table. And with every exhibit, every film we create, every program that we create, and ask them, what are the big issues the public should know about? And then we take all that, digest it, put it into a form that our people think will work with the public, and send it back and say, do we have this right?
Jerry, I can speak with a little bit of authority on this, and I think you are the leader in that model of convening scientists. You're such a wonderful facilitator and convener. You're a deep thinker, and you've led the aquarium industry in that model, which is to have science drive the base, and you bring the scientists. I've been there with you. You'll fill a room with scientists, and they don't care, and you don't care about what the exhibit requirements are going to be. What you want to know are what the issues are, what the animals are going to require, and how that'll all fit together, whether it's an ecosystem services story or something else. And then you marry that knowledge with creatives.
Right.
And tell me about your creatives. So you come out of a workshop of scientists, and they've told you that coral bleaching, we talked about that in another segment of your interview, is an issue. And then you go to the creatives. Give the listeners a little idea of how the creatives take the raw science and then what happens?
Well, it used to be, as you remember,
Yeah.
when we first did this
Yeah.
at another aquarium.
Another aquarium, which will remain unnamed to this particular.
Some of the people were quite offended.
A fine aquarium. The other aquarium's a fine aquarium.
It's a fine aquarium, but they were quite offended that we think we have enough knowledge right inside these walls. We don't need that.
Yeah.
But it got, by the end, they understood that they knew things far better than the scientists did in terms of packaging this kind of information. It was the combination of the two. So in our aquarium, this aquarium, we have some very creative people, but we also bring other people in, creative people from the outside, and whether they're exhibit designers or production companies like Cortina Productions and Bowman Design, and to help us refine the exhibits, the look and feel, because it's all very important.
Well,
how it gets presented.
I'll tell you I'll give you my personal experience in your new wing here. You guys opened up a 70,000 square foot?
No, 29, almost 30,000.
New square foot wing here at the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach. And what blew me away was your plankton wall.
Yeah.
You projected a microscopic view of plankton on this wall such that you could see everything.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm a specialist, so you have to keep that in mind, but I've never seen anybody to engage people in plankton like that wall that you have anywhere else.
And that was a studio out of Europe, Convivial Studios, and
Yeah.
now they work closely with our people. But that was a very creative one.
It was a very creative
and
idea.
also on the other side of that room, which is an art gallery, a permanent art gallery, we wanted something for blind people that dealt with coral reefs. So that gallery focuses on plankton at the base of the food chain, and then also coral reefs because they're kind of the canary in the mine. And there's an entire wall so that if you were blind, it replicates the textures and the structures of coral reefs, and you can run your hand over it and get a good feel for what it's like. So I think the excitement in all of this is when you bring smart, creative people with different perspectives together and develop something that no one person or two persons could do alone. And I like, there's a phrase, creative abrasion. Because people, you rub them against each other, they get irritated, but out of those irritations, something magical can happen.
Yeah. God, you got the best quotes. The quote you taught me many years ago was, you probably remember it better than me, but it had to do with the decisions we make now will have implications for thousands of years, more than any other decision humanity has made in the past. Do you remember that one?
I don't remember that.
Okay. Well, synthesizing these things is an important part of what you do, what the Aquarium of the Pacific does, whether it's quotes, as you've just been doing, or whether it's these exhibits. You really operate at a nexus, I think, between the operating world out here on the one hand, where we're also at. It's important, I think, to mention that we are at one of the most busiest ports in the world, aren't we?
Yep. Long Beach and Los Angeles are the largest ports in the United States. They account for almost 50% of all the finished goods that come into the U.S. from all ports.
Right, so it's a very busy port out here. It's a beautiful place to live. There's a lot of people that live here, and there's a lot of ocean, and the Aquarium of the Pacific is interpreting for that busy civilization out there the natural environment upon which everything depends. Now, you're not saying what everybody's doing is bad by any means. In fact, we all need it. We want it. Humans have become part of the Earth-ocean atmospheric system.
And a dominant part.
And a dominant part. And we need to manage our dominance such that the things that we're dominating, that they actually give us things in services, benefits to humanity. You know, I once heard it said that you can measure the values of a civilization by its skyline, and that the largest structures on the skyline are what that civilization values the most in general terms. And if you look back in time, you know, what did we start out with? Castles. So that meant you valued hereditary power and military activity. And then churches popped into the picture, and suddenly churches were the biggest thing on the skyline. And that showed our transformation to religion. Right. And then you could say that the next phase, I think you could say, were factories and financial centers is kind of what began to dominate the skylines, right? And so that money, which is okay, we all like money, it's not a bad thing, but it's kind of where the focus of our civilization went. I think that I would probably share a vision with you that someday the aquarium should be the biggest building on the skyline, or a facility that addresses those issues should be a dominant structure. And in fact, aquariums have become important parts of coastal development, haven't they?
Yes.
Redevelopment, let's say.
Boston was the first, then Baltimore, Monterey, and this aquarium, yeah. And
can you tell that story? Because I think that's a really important story.
Well, it started in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Baltimore was kind of down on Boston was down on its heels, and somebody decided maybe we should have an aquarium. And Cambridge 7, the architects, got together with the development company that did Faneuil Hall Marketplace, and it completely transformed the waterfront of Boston. And the model worked so well.
And the waterfront was a place before that no one wanted to be.
Nobody wanted to be.
No one wanted it. It
Right.
was full with rats and
Right.
homeless, not a lot of homeless people back then, but it was not an attractive part of the city.
It was
so
not. And then Baltimore, and I lived in Baltimore at the time, and Baltimore had been a wonderful, thriving city. Then the riots came along, the stores moved to the suburbs, the waterfront was abandoned, and they took the same model of an aquarium and the development, same companies, same architect, and they developed the National Aquarium in Baltimore. It transformed that waterfront.
They called those the anchor development.
Those were the
anchor, the first one in, and then it drew people to it. So then you needed parking, you needed restaurants,
Yes.
and then it became like the place to be.
That's right. And,
after time.
Those are both.
I think that's a really important part of this aquarium story. Is that because you're right. It went around the world. Did it happen here too? I don't know the Long Beach story.
Yeah, no, it definitely happened here.
Yeah.
Even when I arrived here 17 years ago, there wasn't a single building between us and the convention center. And now there are all these restaurants and clothing stores and so on.
The same magic happened.
The same kind, and it happened in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It happened. Monterey so they can be catalysts for development.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think with maybe not the tallest building,
Not the
but every society needs what are called third places in society. We have the places where we work and the places where we live, but we need places where we gather to explore, to discuss ideas and ideals and goals. Churches are gathering third places in society. The 92nd Street Y in New York City is, and I think we've become that here in Long Beach because we have a lecture once a week, we have films, festivals, 10 or 12 festivals every year on weekends. That's an important function of bringing people together because we are more and more isolated. We communicate by texting and.
Another thing that a program, a function, a service that the Aquarium of the Pacific here in Long Beach has provided that I'd like to call out on because I'm particularly close to the Pacific Island work. My work and world is very focused in that area, is you've become a central point for Pacific Island communities that live in California, isn't that right?
Yes, we have a Pacific Islander festival every year, and we have African American, Native American, several Hispanic festivals. We have the Pacific Islander Festival and one Festival of Human Abilities, and these are on weekends, and we essentially turn the aquarium over to each of these groups and celebrate in dance and song and storytelling how their cultures relate to the ocean and the earth.
That's fabulous. I mean, that's really good. I don't think any other aquarium does that, do they?
Monterey now has festivals, and some others do.
But they're festivals around cultural connections
so.
like that?
I've never,
okay.
But, it really made a big difference in our aquarium. 15 years ago, our visitors were mostly upper middle class, well-educated Caucasians.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't reflect the society of Southern California at all. Now with all these festivals, we have the most diverse ethnic audience of any aquarium.
Congratulations! Wow,
in the
that's
country.
wonderful,
And
Jerry.
it makes us more
Yeah.
relevant. And
Oh yeah, yeah. You're connecting. You're doing what should happen. And I know from the Pacific Island Festival firsthand, because I live not too far from here. One year it was happening, and some of my Pacific Island friends were getting all excited about this to go dance, to do some of their cultural historical dancing. It really was everybody wanted to be there, so thank you.
And it isn't just on those weekends, it isn't just the Pacific Islanders who come. Other people from all other backgrounds.
That's
And
right.
one of the most dramatic is every year in the African American Festival that we do in Black History Month, there are always young children drumming, young African American children. And then halfway through or so, they invite other kids to join them. And by the end, you've got yellow and white and black all drumming together, and you realize that if we didn't get in the way, that we all can live in harmony on this earth. And it's very emotional to watch that happen.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm going to give you a quote now, because I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Nothing great ever happened without enthusiasm."
Well, yes, I think that's true.
Isn't that a good one?
Yeah.
And you're creating, I think you're creating, you called it the third environment, but you're also creating enthusiasm and positive energy, but including the reality of the world for those that wish to seek it. It's here.
So I'll give you another one that go along.
Yeah, go with it.
Winston Churchill says, "Success is going from failure to failure without losing optimism." So,
I like that. Isn't he so wonderfully quotable?
yes.
I was involved in I'm involved in a couple of other projects, and we all got excited about where we were and the thing, and I said, "Yeah, we are. We're not at the beginning. We're not at the end. We're probably at the end of the beginning."
There's one that
which is Churchill. Yeah.
I'm, as you know, I studied Chesapeake Bay for a long time, and there's this one.
You're an authority on it.
He has this wonderful quote that when we pit the present against the past, we run the risk of losing the future. That's what's happening, I think, in a lot of our environmental movement. We're so preoccupied with restoration, to restore something to what it was 10, 20, 50, 100 years ago. We're losing sight of the future, and we can't restore to something that's gone.
I'm in complete alignment with you on that, Jerry. I've even come up with my own term for it. I think that we suffer from what I call wilderness guilt. That we, as a civilization, have destroyed a lot of wilderness, the way the earth was before we arrived. And we have this guilt that we have to restore it for some reason. And I think we certainly want wilderness.
Yes.
I'm not saying we don't want wilderness. I love wilderness. I've had more than my fair share of it, from Antarctica to the equator. But we don't need to restore things to the way they were. We need to create and restore them to the way they will take us into the future in a sustainable, regenerative way.
Right.
And being able to let go of that obligation a lot of people feel about restoration of wilderness, I think, is an important step. And that Churchill quote, was that Churchill?
Travis Churchill.
Okay, I'm gonna use that one.
And we have to restore ecosystem functions, but our environments, particularly our coastal environments, are going to be very different 20, 30, 50 years from now.
Yes.
And because the coasts are at the leading edge of this change, and we need to be thinking, what do we want them to look like in 50 years?
I was involved, and you were too, at some extent, with the creation of the Ocean Health Index a few years ago, and that was originally a construct that Bill Wrigley, he ran the Wrigley Gum Company at the time, became a good friend of mine, and we collaborated on trying to find solutions. And Bill asked for a metric on how to measure ocean health, because he wanted to invest philanthropically to improve ocean health. And I said, "Oh, fine, there must be one out there somewhere." And I looked around, and there wasn't. We just had an array of measurements for the ocean, from temperature to pH to numbers of fish. So we sat down and spent a lot of time creating an index that combined a lot of data sets to measure ocean health. And there was a moment where we had to define a healthy ocean. And 98% of the scientists, we involved a lot in it, and you were one of them, thought that a healthy ocean was an ocean that would deliver benefits to people on a sustainable way now and into the future, and that we were part of the ocean ecosystem now. We weren't looking for a pristine ocean. But we had a few scientists who just could not let go of the ocean of 1,000 years ago, and that was their goal, was to return the ocean today to what it was like 1,000 years ago, which is, it's not only impossible, it's also impractical, and it doesn't do anything for people or make any sense.
No.
So we have become, this is the thing that people have to get, we have become part of the ocean ecosystem. So as you look at a coastline, and if you see a fishing village, and maybe you see an aquaculture pen, and maybe you see a hotel even, if those activities are functioning in a way that does not degrade the ocean, in fact, they should all be improving the ocean somehow. That's regenerative development. It's okay. That's the new natural.
That's
right there.
Right. I totally agree. I think, and we are part of nature, and as you say, we've come to dominate it. And as Stuart Brand has said, we are gods. We might as well get good at it.
Whew. I think that is we are gods. We might as well get good at it. That's a good one. That's a great one to I think bring this part of our discussion to a conclusion, Jerry. You've really inspired me, as you always do. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I enjoyed being with you.
Yeah, me too.